What if Korea's hottest love stories weren't just scripted? In 2025, 10 boy love couples didn't just steal scenes, they stole hearts. From shy glances to bold declarations, these pairs blurred the line between performance and something real. This isn't just about chemistry, it's about connection. It's about the beauty of same-sex love, powerful, tender, and finally in the spotlight. Which couple felt the most real to you? Which moment made your heart race? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's celebrate love in all its forms. Do-yoon and Shin Jae-min. At first glance, secret relationships look like just another steamy BL drama. Good lighting, soft music, stolen glances. But then Do-yoon and Shin Jae-min walked into frame, and everything changed. There was something different in the way Do-yoon couldn't look away, even when Jae-min wasn't looking. Something raw in Jae-min's silence, like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to finally see through it. Their story didn't unfold, it unraveled. And behind the fake smiles and staged photo shoots, you felt it. A love that was never meant to be public, but was too real to hide. Of course, the plot had all the usual ingredients: denial, risk, temptation, secrets that could ruin careers. But what made secret relationships feel dangerous wasn't the script. It was the way Do-yoon touched Jae-min's shoulder like he was memorizing it. The way Jae-min's voice would crack just a little when he said, "I'm fine," but clearly wasn't. These weren't just actors reading lines. These were two souls reaching for each other through every scene, every pause, every breath. It wasn't performative, it was confession, wrapped in drama. And suddenly, viewers weren't just watching a love story. They were witnessing a quiet rebellion against shame, against rules, against the lie that some love just isn't allowed. The truth is, secret relationships wasn't about drama. It was about dignity, about two men who dared to fall in love even when the world told them not to. And while the cameras eventually stopped rolling, the feeling didn't fade. Fans kept replaying those moments not just because of how beautiful the scenes were, but because of how real they felt. Do-yoon and Shin Jae-min reminded us that queer love doesn't need grand gestures or perfect timing. It just needs space to exist. Because when love is this honest, this brave, and this tender, why should it have to hide? Tae-hoon and Yeowoon. Love for Love's Sake wasn't your average coming-of-age BL story. It didn't ask permission. It didn't chase tropes. It simply introduced two boys who didn't need to speak in grand declarations, because their silences, their glances, their aching pauses said more than dialogue ever could. Tae-hoon was the rebel, the bruised heart with a clenched jaw. Yeowoon was the quiet fire, the boy who smiled like he was afraid to take up space. But when they met, they didn't just fall in love, they recognized each other. Let's be honest, this wasn't the kind of love that makes headlines. There were no public kisses, no fireworks, just subtle touch points, like Tae-hoon offering Yeowoon a helmet before riding off into the dusk, or Yeowoon scribbling lyrics about someone he wasn't allowed to name. Their relationship lived between the lines, not because they were ashamed, but because the world hadn't yet earned the right to witness something so fragile and so real. And yet, despite everything, they chose each other every time. In secret practice rooms, in stolen glances across classrooms, in the simple way Tae-hoon said, "You okay?" like it was a love confession. That's what made them unforgettable. Not the plot, not the drama, but the truth. The undeniable, heart-gripping truth that queer love doesn't need approval to be beautiful. It just is. Love for love's sake gave us more than just a ship to root for. It gave us hope that maybe, just maybe, two boys can love each other without a tragic ending. That softness isn't weakness. That holding someone's hand in public shouldn't feel like a rebellion. And maybe that's what we needed in 2025. Not another hero with a cape, but two ordinary boys who dared to love in a world that still whispers, "You shouldn't." Tae-hoon and Yeowoon remind us that queer love doesn't need to shout to be powerful. Sometimes, all it needs is to exist. And that, in itself, is revolutionary. Dohoe and Juyeong. At first, it looked like classic K-drama sports formula. You've got Dohoe, the reckless prodigy with a smirk that could cut glass. Then comes Juyeong, the rule-following golden boy with a stare so sharp it could straighten a roundhouse kick. They were rivals, opposites, set up to clash. But here's the twist. They didn't just clash, they clicked. From the first sparring match, something buzzed beneath the surface. It wasn't just testosterone or training sweat, it was tension. Real, magnetic, undeniable. The kind of tension that makes you rewind a scene because, did his hand linger too long? Did his eyes say what his mouth couldn't? As the plot thickens with ancient legends and cursed techniques, something more intimate begins to unfold. In the silence of late-night practice sessions, between bruised knuckles and broken boundaries, the walls between Dohoe and Juyeong begin to crack. Juyeong, always the composed one, starts breaking his own rules. Dohoe, always the rebel, finds himself softening, not for fame, not for glory, but for him. Their story isn't framed as a grand love declaration. It doesn't need rainbow spotlights or confession scenes. Instead, it's the glances, the silent loyalty. The way one leans just a little closer during a bandage wrap. Love here is quiet, but powerful. It isn't shouted, it's felt. Let Free may market itself as a martial arts fantasy, but the real magic lies in what's unsaid. Dohoe and Juyeong never use the word love, and maybe that's why it hits harder. Because in a world where queerness is too often reduced to tropes or tragedy, their bond dares to exist in plain sight. Raw, complicated, and beautifully real. It reminds us that love doesn't always need labels. Sometimes it's just two boys training side by side, pushing each other past limits, until friendship becomes something more, something that can't be cursed away. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful move of all. Jihan and Do-yoon. At first glance, Jazz for Two sounds like the title of a moody album you'd play on a rainy night. But this wasn't just about jazz, and it certainly wasn't just for two. It was about Jihan and Do-yoon, two boys standing on opposite sides of silence, bound together by music that said everything their mouths couldn't. Jihan, the quiet pianist with eyes like unresolved chords. Do-yoon, the troubled soul who danced like he didn't believe in tomorrow. Their story wasn't built on grand gestures or fireworks, it was built in whispers, side glances, hesitations. That's what made it real. Love, in this story, wasn't loud. It was accidental. A slow collision between two broken rhythms trying to sync. Jihan didn't fall for Do-yoon because he was perfect. He fell because he wasn't. Because Do-yoon was messy and unpredictable, like jazz itself. And Do-yoon? He didn't just find comfort in Jihan's melodies, he found himself. The film lets their love unfold like a jam session. Raw, unscripted, sometimes offbeat, but always honest. There's a scene where Do-yoon leans in, not to kiss, but just to listen to Jihan breathe. That alone felt louder than any "I love you" could. Because sometimes, queerness lives not in declarations, but in the quiet decision to stay. Jazz for Two isn't about a gay couple. It's about a love that refuses to apologize for existing. That's the real beauty. In a world where people still want proof, labels, explanations, Jihan and Do-yoon offer none. Just vulnerability. Just connection. And maybe that's what makes it revolutionary. Sure, there's pain, rejection, shame, but there's also healing. Soft hands on piano keys, a boy who learns to love out loud, and another who learns he deserves to be loved back. It's not a story with a neat bow, but it is a story with heart. And that, dear viewer, is what makes it unforgettable. Young Do Jin. You know those stories that simmer slowly, not with fireworks, but with flavor? That's exactly how Bon Appetit introduces us to Young Do Jin. One's a charming, soft-spoken chef who hides his feelings behind a cutting board. The other's an awkward but oddly endearing tenant who doesn't know a garlic press from a stapler. At first, their only real connection is food, or more specifically, Do Jin's inability to cook it. But somewhere between burned omelets and awkward breakfast chats, something starts to bubble. A glance lingers, a touch pauses, a silence becomes loaded. Love doesn't arrive like a storm here, it simmers like slow-cooked stew. And isn't that what real connection is? Not instant, but intentional. Here's the thing. Young and Do Jin don't fall in love with dramatic declarations or kiss-in-the-rain moments. They fall in love between the lines. It's in the way Do Jin waits in the kitchen doorway just a little too long. It's the way Young pretends not to notice, but always cooks just enough for two. And then there's that scene. Yes, that one. When Do Jin slurps down a dish and calls it the best thing I've ever had. And Young looks at him like he just handed over the keys to his heart. It's soft, it's awkward, and it's real. Because queer love doesn't need to shout to be powerful. Sometimes it's just two men eating quietly, feeling everything, and saying nothing. What Bon Appétit dares to serve isn't just romance, it's representation, beautifully plated. It says love between two men can be gentle, can be warm, can be absolutely ordinary, and still breathtaking. Young and Do Jin never ask for validation, they just are. They grow together, laugh together, heal together. And by the end, they've taught us that love, queer love, doesn't always have to be a battle to be worth telling. Sometimes it's just about showing up, sharing meals, holding on when the world says let go. And if that's not beautiful, we don't know what is. Tae-joon and Baek Jin-woo. Tae-joon didn't want to be found. He was a man running from the noise, from the system, from the kind of world that gives with one hand and takes with the other. He disappeared into a quiet life as a potter, shaping clay, hiding truth. That is until Baek Jin-woo walked in, and everything got messy. Not loud, not scandalous, just real. Jin-woo came with secrets of his own, a mission, a deadline, a plan. But what he didn't plan on was falling in love with the very man he was sent to find. At first, it wasn't fireworks. It was glances. Too long to be casual, too short to admit. It was Jin-woo silently staying past closing hours, Tae-joon quietly making an extra cup of tea. Two men orbiting each other, both pretending they weren't moving closer. But slowly, like wheel-thrown clay softening under the pressure of a warm hand, their walls began to bend. Jin-woo's mission became blurred by emotions. Tae-joon's silence softened into questions. And somewhere between a bowl of noodles and a half-finished vase, love found its way in, quiet, uninvited, and absolutely undeniable. Their story didn't follow the rules. There were no grand speeches in the rain, no picture-perfect promises. There was fear of being found out, of breaking apart, of being wrong for loving someone so right. But in all that uncertainty, they chose each other anyway. Because love like this doesn't come with guarantees, just moments. Shared smiles, lingering hands, the unspoken understanding that, despite everything, they'd met someone worth risking it all for. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of love, the one that sneaks in, refuses to leave, and makes two people believe that they are enough. Just as they are. No explanations, no apologies. Han Ji-woo and Kim So-joon. In season 1, they gave us a fairy tale. A quiet chef, a bold actor, a love that felt like starlight falling into a cup of warm coffee. But To My Star 2 flips the script. This isn't just a story about two men in love. It's about what happens after love says yes. When real life walks in, when silence becomes louder than words. Han Ji-woo was never the romantic, stoic, rational, scared of mess. And Kim So-joon, a walking sunbeam with a habit of diving heart first. But in this season, that light dims. Not because the love is gone, but because the world, expectations, and personal wounds pull them apart like gravity on two drifting stars. This isn't your classic breakup. There's no villain, no betrayal, just two people who want to love, but don't know how to stay whole while doing it. Ji-woo's fear of being exposed, of loving too loudly, becomes a silent wall. So-joon tries to smile through it, to stay, but you can see it in his eyes. He's breaking too. And yet the show never paints them as broken. It gives them space to hurt, to be stubborn, to fall apart, beautifully. And that's what makes it hit so hard. The arguments feel too real. The silences feel too familiar. This is queer love in its rawest form. Not idealized, not censored, just real. What To My Star 2 gets so right and so heartbreakingly is that queer love doesn't always end in pride parades or perfect proposals. Sometimes it's about the quiet promises, the subtle check-ins, the "I'll wait for you, even when I'm hurting." By the final episode, you're not just hoping they reunite, you understand why they fell apart. That's the beauty of this story. It dares to show that even love as deep as theirs isn't easy. but it's worth it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real message. Queer love isn't fragile, it's human. And when two souls like Han Ji-woo and Kim So-joon fight for each other, that's not drama, that's devotion. Cha Ji-woo and Lee Ro-ae. In the world of college group projects, there's one universal truth. Your partner can either be your savior or your emotional demise. For Cha Ji-woo, soft-spoken, rule-following, heart quietly tucked behind layers of books, it was the latter. At least at first, because his assigned partner wasn't just some random classmate. It was Lee Ro-ae, tall, sharp, cooler than a November breeze in Seoul. The kind of guy who didn't just walk into a room, he changed its temperature. Ji-woo's plan? Survive the assignment. Don't make eye contact. Absolutely do not fall for the senior with a killer jawline. But love, as we know, has never followed a syllabus. Between awkward meetings at cafes and late-night texts about film theory, something shifted. Ro-ae, behind his confident front, began to soften. And Ji-woo, once convinced love was a checklist of do's and don'ts, started realizing it was more about moments. The brush of hands while reaching for the same book, a shared laugh over ramen, a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just full. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't fireworks, but it was real. Two boys navigating the blurry line between friendship and something far scarier, honesty. What made Ji-woo and Ro-ae's story beautiful wasn't just the romance, it was the courage. The slow, quiet unraveling of walls built by fear. The way Ro-ae didn't need to say "I'm here," he just showed up. The way Ji-woo didn't need to confess with grand speeches, just one honest gaze did the work. Love Class didn't shout about being a BL story. It whispered, gently, powerfully. And in that whisper, it said something loud, that love between two men doesn't need to be explained, only felt. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of love worth rooting for. Seo Jae-won and Lee Hyun. Lee Hyun wasn't just running away from the chaos of the city. He was escaping expectations, the noise, the labels. All he wanted was a quiet summer beneath the blue skies and open fields. But peace had other plans, and his name was Seo Jae-won. With calloused hands, a tractor as his wingman, and the kind of grin that could undo your best-laid defenses, Jae-won wasn't just a local farmer. He was a storm disguised as sunshine. Their first encounters weren't fireworks, they were slow burns. Silent glances across vegetable patches, conversations that said more in pauses than in words. A city boy who'd never held a shovel, and a farm boy who'd never backed away from honesty. What could go right? What made their love story different wasn't the drama, it was the quiet. No one came out screaming. No grand declarations under the rain. Instead, their romance grew the way things should, with time, patience, and the bravery to stay. Jae-won never asked Hyun to change. He just stood there, grounded, present, until Hyun realized he didn't have to run anymore. And Hyun, in return, gave Jae-won a kind of tenderness the world had told him he didn't deserve. Together, they watered a bond that didn't just survive the seasons, it bloomed. And in a genre filled with tropes and twists, Love Tractor gave us something rare. Two men who simply chose each other. Without apology, without shame. At its heart, Love Tractor isn't just about romance. It's about rewriting what love is allowed to look like. It reminds us that queer love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the way someone remembers your favorite drink, or walks 3 kilometers just to see you smile. It's about planting hope in a field where people once only expected silence. And let's be honest, if a city boy and a countryside heartthrob can find their way to each other through misunderstandings, pig chases, and a whole lot of cabbage, maybe love really is the simplest, most radical thing we do. In the end, Seo Jae-won and Lee Hyun didn't just break stereotypes. They made space for something more honest, more tender, and far more necessary in today's world. The right to love freely. Kim Hae-bom and Jo Tae-seong. It started like a lot of high school friendships do, clumsy, quiet, and charged with the kind of tension no one wanted to name. Kim Hae-bom, shy and always second-guessing himself, was the exact opposite of Jo Tae-seong, popular, composed, and seemingly untouchable. But as fate would have it, opposites didn't just attract, they collided. One late-night confession changed everything, and not in the way most fairy tales go. Instead of a kiss, there was distance. Instead of a beginning, it felt like the end. And for years, their story paused on a comma, not a period. Fast forward to adulthood. The boys are now men, reunited at a game company of all places, working on a dating simulator. Talk about ironic. Haebom is still soft-spoken, still carrying that old heartbreak like a hidden bug in his code. Tae-song? He's still cool on the surface, but those eyes don't lie. Watching them navigate office awkwardness, shared coffee breaks, and long hours of game development feels like watching a second chance build itself, pixel by pixel. The show doesn't rush. It lingers on glances, hesitations, half-smiles that say too much. And somewhere between fixing game glitches and late-night ramen, love finds its way back into the room. What makes our dating sim unforgettable isn't dramatic declarations or grand romantic gestures. It's the silences. The ones filled with "I missed you," even when nothing's said. The way Tae-song reaches for Haebom first, even when he's afraid. Or the way Haebom finally learns, not just to love, but to believe that he deserves it. It's messy, it's real, and above all, it's tender. Their love doesn't scream, it whispers, with the quiet confidence of something that no longer needs to hide. In a world that still questions same-sex love, their story stands as a soft, glowing reminder. Love is love. And sometimes, the sweetest stories are the ones we almost never got. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in a quiet look, a shared umbrella, a promise never said, but always felt. Through these 10 unforgettable couples, we've seen that same-sex love isn't just valid. It's beautiful, bold, and breathtaking in its own way. These stories aren't just fiction. They reflect real people, real emotions, and a real fight for visibility and love in a world that's still learning. If you believe, like we do, that love in all its forms deserves to be celebrated, then don't stop here. Check out the other videos on our channel. Discover more couples, more stories, and more reasons to never stop believing in love. Hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and let us know which couple touched your heart the most.